Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we don't just skim the surface, we really get into the source material you send us, pull out the core knowledge on these big global stories.
And today, we've got a really significant one. We're looking deep into Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso.
Right, a name that's just exploded onto the world stage. He's become this incredibly captivating figure, maybe one of the most controversial leaders out there today.
Definitely controversial. And possibly the world's youngest head of state. He took power back on September 30th, 2022. Reports put him in his early to mid-30s then.
So young. And his actions immediately put Burkina Faso, well, right at the heart of this resurgent anti-imperialist feeling in West Africa.
It's more than just a feeling, isn't it? It's a full-blown movement.
Exactly. And the sources we're looking at today, they don't frame his rise as just, another coup. They see it as embodying this radical resistance, a pushback against what they call neocolonialism.
Which means we're looking at a government that in less than 3 years has tried to completely rewire its economy, directly challenge its former colonial power, France, and push for some really deep reforms.
But like with any figure trying such massive change, there are huge contradictions, sometimes violent ones.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really unpack all of that. Look at these reforms, the speed of his foreign policy changes, which have been stunning, and importantly, understand the cost. What's the price of this really fierce homegrown nationalism?
It's a high-stakes game they're playing.
Extremely high stakes.
So here's the big question for you listening in. How does a nation, especially one sitting on immense resources but historically dependent, actually reclaim its sovereignty? In a world still dominated by huge multinational companies and geopolitical interests? And crucially, what's the price tag for that independence, maybe in terms of stability or even democracy?
Let's start there with sovereignty, because the sources we have treat it with incredible intensity.
Yeah, it's not just symbolic, is it? Not just having a flag in a UN seat.
No, not at all. It's presented as an existential fight, a battle for survival, for dignity. It's about owning your land, your resources, your policies, and ultimately your future.
And the urgency comes from that basic, stark contrast. Africa, potentially the richest continent in resources, gold, diamonds, minerals, land.
Everything.
Yet its people, nations like Burkina Faso, remain incredibly poor. That's the paradox fueling this whole thing.
And the sources are pretty direct about why. They argue colonialism didn't really end, it just changed its clothes.
Right. It morphed into things like exploitative trade deals, predatory lending, the sheer power of multinational corporations.
And this is critical, constant meddling by foreign intelligence agencies trying to keep things, well, favorable to external interests, destabilizing leaders who rock the boat.
That's the root of the resentment, isn't it? And it's what gives Traoré such huge popular support. His words tap right into that deep frustration.
Decades of it. Generations, really.
So when he talks about sovereignty, it's not abstract. It means literal, physical control. Owning the dirt, owning what comes out of it, setting the rules, securing the future without asking permission.
Yeah, the sources mention him carrying this deep sense of historic responsibility. Like he sees himself continuing that early post-independence Pan-African dream.
And that message, that connection to history, it lands powerfully, especially with young Africans.
Hugely. They are just tired of the old system, what the analysis calls extraction without compensation, tired of leaders seen as puppets.
Puppets installed just to keep the resource taps open for others.
Exactly. And Traoré's style, the fiery speeches, wearing traditional clothes instead of Savile Row suits, it's all a very deliberate signal, a break from that perceived dependency on the West.
But breaking away like that, especially challenging a former power like France, it invites danger. Real danger.
Oh, absolutely. The source material highlights some really serious security threats against Traoré himself. Shows just how disruptive he's seen to be.
Yeah, the numbers are kind of shocking. Reports claim over 18 assassination attempts since he took power in 2022.
18. And there's one specific alleged incident mentioned from April 2025. That just shows the stakes. A bodyguard was reportedly offered $5 million.
$5 million. US dollars.
$5 million US dollars, allegedly by foreign operatives, specifically named as French intelligence, to kill Traoré.
Wow. If true, that's an astronomical sum. It tells you this isn't just some local political squabble. He's seen as a fundamental threat to the established order in the region.
Precisely. And the analysis frames these alleged attempts, verified or not, as more than just attacks on one man. They're seen as assaults on the sovereignty of an entire people.
And that narrative, that feeling of being under attack, provides a justification, doesn't it, for his sharp turn away from the West?
It absolutely does. It fuels that demand for France to, as the sources put it, step back once and for all. A total rupture.
Okay, so that's the context, the defiance. Let's pivot to how he turned that into actual economic policy, specifically with gold. This is where the rhetoric meets reality.
Right. And Burkina Faso is the perfect place for this because it's a major player, Africa's fourth largest gold producer.
So gold is huge for their economy.
Massive. Historically, like 16% of GDP, over 80% of exports. But crucially, until Traoré, most of the profit flowed out. Foreign companies controlled the mines through old concession deals.
Deals may be signed decades ago under very different circumstances.
Often, yes. So Traoré's government moved fast and aggressively on resource sovereignty. Nationalization was key.
So they took over mines. How did that work exactly? Was it just seizing them?
Not entirely confiscation. They nationalized at least 5 major gold mines, including big ones like Bungu and Wahgnion, previously run by UK-based Endeavour Mining.
A major international company?
One of the biggest. But the sources note they reportedly paid around $80 million in compensation.
Okay, so some compensation. But the goal was clearly state control.
Unmistakably. And it wasn't just about those existing mines. They changed the rules for the future, too. That's the new mining code from July 2024.
Right. Tell us about that. How does it change the game?
It fundamentally rewrites the deal. Foreign companies now must give the state a 15% stake in their projects, completely free. No cost to Burkina Faso.
15%, just like that, off the top.
Off the top. And on top of that, the government has the right to buy another 30% stake at market rates.
So potentially up to 45% state ownership if they buy in.
Correct. Which, if exercised, effectively gives the state majority control. It's a radical shift away from just collecting royalties and taxes.
More like the production sharing agreements you see in oil and gas.
Exactly like that model. Trying to copy what works in the Gulf or Norway, where the nation dictates terms and keeps the bulk of the benefit, that 15% free stake alone completely changes the revenue dynamics from day one. The stated goal is national majority control. Full stop.
And it wasn't just about owning the mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wanted the value added kept in Burkina Faso.
Yes. His mantra was, Burkina Faso will mine its own gold. So, step 1. Ban unprocessed gold exports. Keep the raw stuff home.
Okay, but then you need to process it.
Exactly. So, in November 2023, they commissioned the country's first big domestic gold refinery. It's huge, reportedly able to process 150, maybe 200 tons a year.
That's a massive industrial project. What's the strategic aim there?
To break dependency. Cut out the European refiners, mainly in Switzerland and London, who used to capture all that value-added profit. Keep the refining profits in Ouagadougou.
But hang on, running a refinery like that isn't simple. You need reliable power, specialized chemicals, skilled workers, metallurgists.
That's the big challenge, absolutely. The sources acknowledge this. They built the refinery, which is a statement in itself, but the technical expertise, that's still a bottleneck.
So they need foreign help initially.
They do, but the difference is now they're paying for technical services, not giving away the resource rights. It's a different relationship. And yes, power is a constant issue. That's why the big push for solar power, we'll get to later, is so crucial. It's all connected.
Okay, so the intent is clear. What about the results? Has this aggressive gold strategy actually paid off, according to the government?
Well, according to their numbers, it's been a massive success. They claim they've generated something like $18 billion in gold income since early 2022.
$18 billion. That's a huge number.
It's enormous, designed to showcase the success of taking control. But, and this is a big but, the sources are very careful here. They say independent verification of that number is really difficult.
Why is that? Less transparency now.
Potentially. New state-controlled sales channels, less oversight perhaps. So the number itself is powerful politically, projecting success, but confirming it externally is hard.
So it serves a purpose, whether it's fully verifiable or not.
Precisely. It's a statement. And it ties into that analogy the source used about the Gulf countries.
Right, the idea of shifting the model.
Exactly. Moving away from the old exploitative deals where London or Paris benefited most towards what they call a win-win model, like in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, where the oil contracts are written in Riyadh or Doha, not by foreign companies.
Where the nation owns the resource, and foreign firms are basically service providers.
That's the goal. Demanding to be treated as an equal or even the controlling partner in your own resource wealth.
Okay, so beyond gold, this drive for control extends to the whole domestic economy, right? especially around finance and debt.
Yes, this is another really radical part of the strategy. They're actively pushing for development without relying on traditional Western loans,
So saying no to the IMF and the World Bank.
publicly and repeatedly. They frame those institutions and their conditional loans as tools of neocolonialism. Loans that come with strings attach privatization, austerity that undermines sovereignty.
But doesn't rejecting the IMF risk cutting yourself off completely? Financial isolation?
That's the usual risk, yeah. But there's a nuance the sources point out. While they reject conditional loans, they did accept a pretty large grant, over $100 million from the World Bank in 2024.
Ah, so grants are okay, just not loans with policy conditions.
Apparently so. Grants don't create debt or force policy changes. And some sources also claim they've managed to clear or just refuse to repay a significant chunk of old external debt, maybe $4 or $5 billion worth. Again, hard to verify precisely, but the message is clear: financial self-reliance.
And domestically, the economic model seems like this interesting mix. Austerity for the elites, but populism for the masses.
That sums it up pretty well. It's politically very shrewd. On one hand, slash salaries for ministers, parliamentarians by 30%, a clear anti-elite move.
Showing the leadership is sharing the sacrifice, so to speak.
Exactly. But there's a risk there too, right? Cutting salaries for top officials could lead to a brain drain, skilled people leaving public service.
Did the sources mention that?
They acknowledge the risk, yeah. But the calculation seems to be that the political win, the populist appeal of hitting the elites, outweighs that potential loss in a short term.
And they balance it with...
With a massive 50% pay rise for civil servants, teachers, nurses, local administrators, the rank and file.
50%, wow.
Yeah. The idea is direct redistribution. Taking that state wealth, especially the potential new gold money, and putting it straight into people's pockets, boosting morale, building loyalty.
And this self-reliance push also extends deep into agriculture, doesn't it? Trying to grow and make things locally.
Absolutely. Big focus on import substitution, keeping value added inside the country, especially food and textiles.
What kind of projects are we talking about?
Concrete stuff, like 2 new tomato processing plants. Tomatoes are a major crop, but huge amounts used to rot after harvest. These plants aim to stop that waste.
That makes sense. Simple, practical, but potentially huge impact.
Right. Same logic with cotton. New cotton mills, support for local artisanal processing. Instead of just exporting raw cotton fiber for pennies, they want to make the fabric, the clothes locally, capture that value.
And food security.
Yeah.
Fertilizer prices went crazy globally.
Key point. They set up local fertilizer factories. That's vital. And it's credited with a big jump in rice production, over 400,000 tons reported. That directly helps feed the population without relying on expensive, volatile imports.
Okay, those are tangible results on the ground. What about bigger infrastructure? Roads, power. That's often the benchmark people use to judge progress.
Infrastructure is absolutely central to Traoré's narrative of legitimacy through results. They report building or upgrading nearly 1,000 kilometers of roads since the takeover.
That sounds impressive.
It is, but their stated goal is way more ambitious. 5,000 kilometers of roads every year.
5,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
Annually. In a country facing a major insurgency. That sounds incredibly difficult.
It's astronomical. And the analysis suggests it's partly a political statement, a projection of strength and intent as much as a realistic engineering target right now.
Because building roads is also about asserting control over territory, right?
Exactly. Every kilometer of new road is a political act, pushing back against the areas controlled by insurgents. They're focusing on linking economic hubs, securing routes for mining and agriculture.
And energy. We talked about the refinery needing stable power.
Big investments there, too. Solar power is key. They've launched major solar farms like the 25 MW one at Donson, 30 MW at Nagriongo. These are strategic.
How much power are we talking?
The sources say these projects now cover about 30% of national energy needs. That reduces reliance on imported diesel, stabilizes the grid, helps industry. It's crucial for that sovereignty goal.
What else on the infrastructure front?
Transport is getting attention too. A new airport for Ouagadougou, designed for 1 million passengers a year, and they're working on renovating the railway line to Abidjan on the coast. That's a vital economic link.
So roads, energy, transport. What about social infrastructure? Health, education?
Also a major focus, aimed at immediate impact. They report building 55 new rural medical centers and rolling out free primary healthcare nationwide.
Free healthcare, that's a massive policy shift.
Huge. Directly impacts the poorest citizens. And in education, they've pushed university enrollment up by 70%, apparently through subsidies and building more capacity. Again, tangible results aimed at building legitimacy quickly.
Okay, lots of specific projects, lots of impressive numbers being reported. But let's pull back to the big picture. What's the overall economic health, despite these efforts?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. The economy is growing. GDP is up significantly from under 19 billion in 2022 to maybe 24 billion projected for 2025. And analysts see potential for strong growth, maybe 8% year going forward.
So the engine is running faster.
Definitely. But the hole they're climbing out of is incredibly deep. Poverty is still staggeringly high, 63.8%. And while the overall economy grows, the population is growing so fast that per capita income isn't keeping pace.
Meaning the average person isn't necessarily feeling much richer yet.
Exactly. Progress is real, but the scale of the underlying poverty and demographic pressure is just immense. It takes more than a couple years to fix that.
Now, all this focus on domestic control, self-reliance, it inevitably spilled over into foreign policy, a really dramatic shift there.
Dramatic is an understatement. The break with France was incredibly fast, very complete.
How did that unfold?
Early 2023, Traoré kicked out the remaining French troops. That ended Operation Sabre, decades of military ties, just like that.
Wow. Just told them to leave.
Pretty much. And then suspended French aid, banned French news outlets like RFI, France 24. It was a total severing of ties, political, military, symbolic.
They didn't become isolated. They built something new, regionally.
Yeah.
This Alliance of Sahel States, the AES.
Right. This is maybe the biggest geopolitical move. Co-founded with Mali and Niger in mid-2024. It's explicitly a mutual defense pact. An attack on one is an attack on all.
Like a Sahelian NATO almost.
In principle, yes. But it's also an economic bloc, designed deliberately to bypass the established regional body, ECOWAS, which they see as too influenced by the West, especially France.
And they're building actual institutions for this AES. It's not just a paper agreement.
They have very ambitious plans. The sources list things like a dedicated AES investment bank to fund projects without IMF World Bank conditions, a regional court, even shared passports, ID systems, telecom protocols.
So really deep integration. Trying to build a whole parallel structure.
That's exactly the idea. Analysts see it as the potential start of a durable Sahelian bloc, structurally resistant to Western influence. A major realignment.
Okay, so if you break with France and build this new bloc, you probably need a powerful new friend. And they found one in Russia.
Very quickly, the relationship deepened rapidly. While they don't officially say Wagner, they welcomed its successor, the Africa Corps, in 2024.
What do? The Africa Corps?
Provide crucial support. Training, counterterrorism advice, intelligence. They filled the security gap left when the French departed.
And economically?
Huge jump.
No.
Bilateral trade with Russia reportedly hit $753 million in 2024. Moscow became a major economic partner almost overnight.
What kind of deals are they signing? Is it just guns and trade?
It seems much broader, suggesting a long-term strategic alignment. Agreements on subsidized wheat imports crucial for food stability, university scholarships for Burkinabe students in Russia, and the big one, a commitment to help establish a nuclear research center in Burkina Faso.
A nuclear research center. With Russian help.
That's what the agreements reportedly cover. And Traoré's visit to Moscow in May 2025 really cemented his position as a key player in this new multipolar Africa that Russia is promoting.
But this leads directly to the big criticism, doesn't it? Are they just swapping one master for another? French dependency for Russian dependency?
That's the million-dollar question, and the sources definitely raise it. Critics warn, look, you kicked out France, which held sway through history and finance, but now you're relying heavily on Russia for security.
And that security reliance could come with strings attached down the road. Political demands, resource access for Moscow.
That's the fear, that it's just a different flavor of external control, even if it's currently framed as a partnership against Western imperialism.
And Traoré seems to be deliberately pushing the West away diplomatically, too.
Oh, very calculatedly. He reportedly turned down multiple U.S. invitations in 2025, including one to Donald Trump's inauguration. The excuse was always local commitments.
But the message was clear.
Crystal clear. Aides were quoted saying Washington has no moral authority to lecture Africa on governance anyway. It plays perfectly to his Pan-African, anti-Western base across the continent.
Okay, calculated moves. But now we have to confront the biggest elephant in the room, the ultimate paradox. Traoré seized power, promising security. But the security situation seems worse than ever.
This is the absolute core tension. His justification for the coup was precisely that. Save the nation from terrorism. Restore order where elected governments had failed. His line was, democracy cannot exist in chaos. Security first.
The strong hand was needed, was the argument.
Right. A unified military command could succeed. But the data tells a different story.
What does it show?
It's grim. Burkina Faso is still incredibly insecure. Jihadist groups JNIM, ISGS are still rampant. Over 2 million people remain displaced. And violence actually got worse in 2024. Fatalities jumped nearly 50% year-on-year, according to ACL.
50% increase under military rule focused on security.
It's shocking. The insurgents are hitting infrastructure, civilians, the very things he promised to protect.
How much of the country is effectively outside government control now?
Estimates suggest nearly 40% as of 2024. 40%. And the human cost is horrific, over 17,000 deaths since his takeover alone. For ordinary people in large parts of the country, the government's promise of security is just not reality.
Which must make it hard to access those new clinics or get goods to market.
Exactly. It undermines everything else.
So if the core promise of stability isn't being met, what measures is the regime taking internally? How is it trying to regain control?
This is where it gets darker. The push for stability has led to increasingly authoritarian methods.
Such as?
Military purges, getting rid of officers suspected of disloyalty. Loyalty tests within the army. Mass forced conscription, basically drafting civilians into volunteer militias to fight the insurgents. Harsh anti-terror laws that give the state sweeping powers of surveillance and detention.
And what happens to people who disagree? Or journalists who report critically?
The space for dissent has shrunk dramatically. That's the trade-off being made. Journalists have been jailed. Independent media outlets shut down. International watchdogs ranked Burkina Faso's press freedom among the worst in Africa in 2025.
So, militarization, censorship. It sounds like the classic authoritarian playbook justified by a crisis.
That's certainly how critics see it, and it directly contradicts any near-term prospect of returning to democratic norms.
Which loops us back to that fundamental question the sources wrestle with. What makes a government legitimate in a situation like this? Is it the election, the process, or is it delivering results, the roads, the schools, the feeling of national dignity?
That's the heart of the legitimacy debate. Given Burkina Faso's history, 8 coups since independence, maybe people are willing to accept a strong military hand if it delivers security and opportunity, things previous elected governments couldn't.
So, results over rituals, competence over democratic theory.
That seems to be the argument being implicitly made. The sources suggest the ideal is probably a mix, a functioning democracy with integrity. But Traoré's choice right now seems to be build the foundation first, the economy, the institutions, security, even if it takes 5 years or more under military guidance, before risking what he sees as chaotic elections.
But the risk is that the temporary military phase never ends.
That's always the risk with these kinds of transitions. Prioritizing results over democratic rituals can easily slide into permanent autocracy.
And this tension is kind of embodied in his public image, right? The Pan-African symbol versus the internal reality.
Absolutely. He's a master of digital politics. Social media is flooded with memes, AI videos comparing him to Thomas Sankara, calling him Africa's Messiah.
Sankar's a revered figure. That comparison carries huge weight.
Immense weight. And this carefully crafted digital persona inspires massive loyalty, especially among young people across the continent. It fuels that wider movement.
But it's a shield, too, hiding the less attractive parts.
That's the critique, that this digital populism masks the reality of weak state institutions back home, silences dissent, and helps consolidate military power. It's authoritarianism with a modern, tech-savvy face.
So the big question remains, is he a genuine reformer laying groundwork for a better future? Or an opportunist using a crisis to seize and hold power?
And the sources suggest the answer is probably somewhere complicated in between, stuck in that really difficult space between genuine national emancipation and potentially dangerous international isolation and internal repression.
A tightrope walk indeed.
A very precarious one. His entire legacy depends on whether he can actually transition from being the symbol, the revolutionary, to being a leader who builds stable, inclusive institutions.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has, without doubt, pushed an incredibly ambitious agenda incredibly fast. He's changed Burkina Faso's direction fundamentally.
No question. The sources confirm the focus on self-reliant development, The state taking control of resources like gold via the new code and refinery, the direct challenge to neocolonial debt, and reshaping regional politics with the AES. These are major shifts.
Huge shifts. But, and it's a massive but, these gains have happened alongside and are arguably enabled by the security crisis that's actually getting worse and a style of governing that relies on military control, purges, and silencing opposition.
The authoritarian means are currently being justified by the intended ends.
So the key takeaway for you listening is this. You've seen a really clear example of how resource nationalism, backed by strong state power, can dramatically reshape a country's economy and its place in the world.
But you also see the inherent conflict, that drive for total sovereignty, especially in a place facing extreme insecurity like the Sahel, often clashes directly, even violently, with democratic principles and individual freedoms.
It really leaves you wondering about the end game. If real sovereignty means not just kicking out foreign troops and rejecting foreign loans, but also achieving peace and security across the entire country, where does that leave Burkina Faso? Where does it leave the AES?
And that's the final thought we want to leave you with. If the economic results, the new schools, the gold money, the roads are real and visible, how long can a government rely just on those results and on that powerful Pan-African feeling before the people start demanding the democratic rituals they were initially promised, the free press, accountability, elections?
That tension between results and ritual seems like it will define the future not just for Traoré, but for the whole region he's trying to lead.
A fascinating high-stakes experiment indeed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Captain Ibrahim Traoré and this complex new phase of African sovereignty. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the source material shaping our world.